Hello and welcome. Carlton reached the byes with a quality win against the Bombers, but this win wasn't a conventional Carlton win. Carlton kicked 15 goals in the match, but only 3 of those came from Curnow and McKay. Cripps and Walsh played, but not to their usual prolific standards. That leads me to the 2 discussion points for today's episode of Carlton Analysis. Carlton's unlikely leading goal kicker on the night, Elijah Hollands, and Carlton's unlikely leading possession winner, Ruckman Tom De Koning, an embodiment of how Carlton have grown as a team to not rely on their heavyweights to carry them over the line, and an embodiment of Scott's dilemma in preparing for this match during the week.
Often it's the lesser lights, so to speak, that sort of get under your guard.
Now, before we begin, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the show if you want to remain tuned for the next Carlton analysis after the bye. I will also mention that I'm going to be doing a couple of Carlton live streams next week for about an hour each to compensate for no Carlton football being played. So if you want to, tune in for that, make sure to remain tuned for more information. Enjoy the video. Let's start with Tom De Koning. This matchup against Todd Goldstein was fascinating. With 326 games in the bank, Todd Goldstein, whilst lacking youth, holds wisdom and experience on the AFL field, playing a youthful ruckman, still with plenty of room to grow. Whilst I haven't been entirely critical of Tom De Koning this year, I was wrong. Build this guy a statue. Nah, scrap that. It's acres reserved. But hey, let's get this straight. I still stand by my view playing 2 rucks in the same side, but if De Koning's gonna play like this, hand him the keys to the front entrance of Icon Park, because if he owned it on the MCG, he can own what he wants. Well, let's not get that far, but I think Michael Voss's thoughts become a lot less complicated. Without Pitto, De Koning can play every second in the ruck without his ceiling getting lowered. That said, it's also heavily dependent on the second ruck, may that be Kennedy, Cripps or McKay, to hold their own in the non-De Koning minutes as we highlighted last week. It does allow things like this to happen, where with De Koning on the bench, Kennedy took Peter Wright on the ruck matchup fractionally earlier. Essendon, following an intercept, kick straight to Matt Kennedy. Kennedy switches, but watch Peter Wright and Matt Kennedy here. Wright as a ruckman sort of forgot he's playing like a ruckman because he's somehow found himself defending the shallowest line to Carlton's goal. Meanwhile, Matt Kennedy snuck in behind and Essendon have got the spacing all wrong to employ the zone defense. There's no 3-on-2 up the ground, and there's no fluidity in the middle of the ground unless this option is present and this open to allow the play to progress promptly. I think this is the extra midfielder look that Carlton are looking for with this ruck setup, and that is something I brush over later. Against Goldstein, it was very much a game of chess. Goldstein was incredibly good at killing the momentum of a run and jump by De Koning, especially in those center square bounces, thus negating the influence of De Koning. He'd do a good job of using the off-arm on boundary throw-ins to keep De Koning at bay and really protect the landing space well. Watching this game, these occurrences were in abundance, and that's ultimately why Goldstein ended with double the amount of hitouts as De Koning. But honestly, the man they call king around the club needs to be treated like a king this week because man, that last quarter was absolutely blistering. I think this quote really helps explain De Koning's evolution as the game wore on.
You can't underestimate beating a veteran, and a veteran ruckman as well. They are crafty. Goldstein is a very crafty ruckman, and you can see the way that he's sort of skinning the cat different ways, dancing around him a little bit. Then there's the grunt to just try and jump through him.
Carlton had advantages in some pretty key areas in the fourth. And guess who was at the top of the hierarchy in the stats that concern these advantages? Well, none other than the king himself. Brad Scott put it pretty bluntly when he said pre-game for the conditions.
And again, in big games, it's pretty simple footy early. Win the ball in the contest, get it going your way.
These comments by Scott and Rewalt were shown in a big way in the fourth quarter. De Koning takes it out of the ruck for the first centre clearance, but note Goldstein does exactly what he did all day to knock De Koning's influence. That little arm extension to kill the run and jump momentum. But De Koning's more agile, and he moves right around him as a nice little countering punch. Carlton get a goal from this inside 50. Then he tracks the ball at the front of the stoppage to pelt it inside 50, which results in another Carlton score. Then from a throw-in perspective, the short throw-ins really helped De Koning because he didn't have to change too much, but for Goldstein, no longer could he hold position. He had to come forward as well, which resulted in the more youthful winning this contest. And Carlton get another inside 50. Moments later, doesn't win the clearance, but like the previous occurrence, is hungrier. Caldwell potentially can provide a quick dish to Perkins, but TDK knocks him off balance and it spills out to Cripps. And whilst his next tap goes straight down to Nick Martin, he's able to send Martin sideways and backward, allowing Cripps to also cut him off and thus lack the penetration to get it forward. I will laud the around the ground stuff, but when Carlton surge and score without you even having a chance to blink, it comes from stoppage. And if De Koning's going to be our tool in the midfield, that time has got to count. Carlton, in the time De Koning did all of this, they had the first 8 inside 50s of the quarter and kicked 3 goals too, with a 4th coming off the back of a turnover shortly after. I don't need to say much more. Now, all of this said, De Koning had a habit of coming off at practically this point, identically in each quarter. When he came back on in the 3rd quarter for the final 5-minute stint, ready and refreshed to have a proper crack at it, that's where you saw the foundation for his final quarter efforts. I think that's where you saw the coming of age element emerge, as there were moments that foreshadowed a shift in Carlton's stoppage ascendancy, and with that, an evolution in De Koning's knowledge of how his matchup schooled him earlier on. Very interesting to see throughout the game, De Koning was willing to impact at the contest and a kick closer, practically taking a gamble as Goldstein snuck in behind towards goal. This definitely came at a higher tendency earlier in the match. For example, here, where De Koning doesn't impact and Goldstein, who maintained midfield position in the middle of the ground, ended up negating the spare that Carlton usually have behind the ball, in this case, Newman. I think that embodies De Koning's mindset on the day and how he was able to be as involved as he was. A very front-footed, aggressive mindset where he wasn't really concerned about the negative implications. He was like, well, we don't need to worry about the negative implications if I'm holding my opponent accountable, first and foremost. The gutsy 3rd quarter spoil draws from this philosophy where De Koning isn't necessarily concerned with giving Goldstein goal side position because he's closer to the play and always believes he's on the front foot. Goldstein's going to have to come forward at the ball through De Koning, which given his age won't necessarily result in success. Whilst Perkins needed better awareness for how close he was to goal, you see that positioning by De Koning work wonders in cutting in front to chop off the pass. This positioning doesn't only give De Koning the platform to attack, but it also possesses a sound defensive strategy. Should we need to rely on the kick mark game a little bit more, I like the unconventional use of De Koning receiving a short kick more centrally and up the ground as opposed to being used up the line. It may be a little bit more energy sapping, but it definitely calls for the opposing ruckman to face a bit more of a unique, demanding task that lacks familiarity, as we saw with Peter Wright needing to deal with Matt Kennedy earlier on. De Koning can belt a kick, and he's unselfish if the personnel suits, both of which can enhance ball movement, something that Pitto does on a lesser scale. Now for Elijah Hollands. This guy had a quality game. 3 goals, chipped in with the 8 score involvements, which is pretty quality for a sub 20 possession game. I think for me, it's the classiness with the footy, the level-headedness, the game sense. A few around the club have noted exactly that.
Certainly early days, he showed a really high level to be able to understand the game, his decision-making and thinking through roles like that.
The way he runs his patterns defensively obviously helps us out, and then when he gets the ball in hand, he's so composed and he finds that bridge kick really well.
Out of all the examples I'll provide today, this stands out for what we've just heard and said. If you remember from this example, Carlton won a free kick despite Essendon possessing it in the middle of the ground. I just want you to watch the clip and we'll see if you notice anything.
Caldwell off at a half lead.
Carlton free kick. Carlton free kick, straight to him.
So it's a hold.
Straight to him.
This isn't awfully difficult to spot, but it's barely getting talked about. Before Seven changes the camera angle, you'll see 4 players in the center square with a Carlton jumper. The first and only one with the awareness to know what's going on in rapid time is Elijah Hollands. That smarts means he's already anticipated and gotten to a position 2 kicks away. Whilst Hewitt was the available option wide, Elijah has bolted to get to the next kicking point, and that game awareness got him his first goal. But there are some other nice little moments. There's this example which really highlights his poise. Carlton were really absorbent to Essendon attacks in the third quarter, and this is one example of Carlton keeping Essendon out of that central zone within 40 metres of goal. Hollands steps back into the space, then when this bomber leads, sucking this blue forward. Obviously, there's a window of daylight for Essendon with a precise kick to hit a target inside 50, but the lackluster effort means the kick doesn't reach Guelphy and Elijah is there to chop it off. But it's the class of the kick for me because Ben McKay is marshalling quite well. The lead of Williams indicates the spread the Blues are looking to use, but it feels like Hollands corrects his kick on the action to go more centrally, pulling the kick ever so slightly, now playing to the advantage of Williams, going front left rather than to the right. Then Carlton can use some shorter passes and overlap to maximize that space. The key thing about this, Elijah didn't skip the steps. Rather than taking one kick to go wide, which could create a congested contest, the shorter kick means the space can be better manipulated as there's multiple directional changes, less congested contests, more one-on-ones, and thus more chances of success. This example comes at a time where Carlton had faced multiple Essendon entries and were getting a little bit of momentum at the back end of the quarter. You'll see both De Koning and Hollands involved here with composed possessions in close, and Elijah's flick over the shoulder removes the impact of Perkins, who's left Hewitt open as he's drawn in, allowing that time for Newman to get a clean look. I think this shows the importance of the half forward in the structure more so in probably a lot of AFL team systems. On the switch, for where Hollands starts, he's important because he's going to be one of the first to get to the other side, and he's also going to cover space resourcefully because he's going to end up a kick behind the football. I'm not sure how effective his positioning is here, but it helps feed into Carlton zone for sure. Essendon can't kick centrally, meaning they're only looking down the line, and I'd have to guess the reason Essendon handballed as opposed to the kick was because the option up the line wasn't ample, and this is exactly what Carlton wanted. That result at least is partially dependent on where Elijah was placed, and in this example is pretty effective. Now, this final quarter example I think shows the combination of smarts and skill by Elijah. Let's note the Bombers players here. Heppel, Perkins, Gresham, Wright, Cox and Caldwell. Essendon absolutely fluffed the kick, Boyd reads well, and McGovern remains wide. But you'll notice, Wright in the white boots, Heppel and Gresham in the red boots, Perkins, Cox, Caldwell's all the way back here. And so that's really smart for Elijah to hold that position, having seen every other Bomber at the contest surge forward, knowing that a simple turnover means he's going to be open. It is a gamble, but sometimes if that is what the opposition is going to give you, you need to be able to identify it and exploit it, which Elijah Hollands does to a T here. The second smart choice is to kick sideways and quickly to simultaneously keep the play moving whilst buying the forwards time to get a shift in and run into this space. Williams does that, and then Elijah, reading the running lane that's staring him down, pivots from left to right, seeing that we've got one wide and Cox has taken him. Instead of Williams wheeling round, we keep that dynamic play going with a more direct run. Then, the third part of this is the execution. Jake Cully's got a good 15 centimetre height advantage on Durds, but the drive that a handball receive provides, as it does in this case, means Durden just simply needs to block off Cully's run backward into the landing space, keeping him on the wrong side to spoil. The kick allows this effort to be effective and Durden can rake it in. Ultimately, Elijah's got the perfect mix of poise and quality combined with the game awareness that perfectly complements and enhances that skill he's got. Overall, in a game where players weren't clean and weren't accurate, Elijah Hollands was consistently the complete opposite. And TDK, no two ways about it, was an everywhere man. A high performance De Koning bodes well for Carlton as it endorses squad balance and team success by that same token. Hollands, well, his output changes week by week, but his importance to a Carlton win never changes. What is your assessment of these two guys so far in 2024? Maybe give us a grade in the comments section. I hope you enjoyed this installment of Carlton Analysis. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to doing this analysis again with you in a couple of weeks. But until then, stay safe, enjoy the break, and bye for now.